Welcome to the Andy Social Podcast. My name is Andy, and welcome. Welcome to this show. If this is the first time that you've tuned into the podcast, I highly recommend that you turn this episode off and go and listen to something else, as in another episode, of course. Main reason is that this episode is a bit of a fake one. It's just going to be something that's a bit of a quick ramble, nothing terribly interesting. However, there might be something of interest to you, but certainly don't judge the show based on this episode. I'll cut right to the chase. This is going to be very, very quick, but it's a bit of a plug for this Saturday, which is the podcast party, also known as the Andy Social, which has been affectionately titled by good friend Mick Goddard. So thanks, Mick, for the title. So the details of this podcast party, if you are in Sydney on this weekend, or you already live here, is May 28th, Saturday, May 28th. It is at the Fun Room, which is a private bar, or it's a small whiskey bar, I should say, within Frankie's Pizza by the Slice. It's in Sydney CBD, down towards the Harbour Bridge end of the city. So if you want to come along to this, it's purely an excuse to get together and have a drink and have a chat, and it's a bit just a social gathering. That's all it is. But I'm hoping that it can be the start of something really cool and a semi-regular event that can happen off the back of the podcast. I'm really excited to build a community around this podcast, and there's been so many great things that have happened as a result of the podcast over the last several months of doing this. And the feedback that I've got from you guys has just been amazing. Just been so many cool stories that have happened as a result of people listening to the podcast, and I've learnt so much from the people that I've spoken to, and it's just been a great social experiment for me, and it's amazing how much someone can grow over a very short period of time. And with the guests that I have coming up and the ideas that I have on the back of this podcast, it's extremely exciting, and I'm really, really pumped to make this a community thing, not just a podcast around me. And while every once in a while I get on a little bit of a ramble and start talking about myself, and then of course you're listening to me ramble now, this is all about me facilitating something that you guys can listen to and learn, and for me as well. It's a great excuse, and it's a bit of a mask to be able to have an excuse to talk to people and have a purposeful conversation. And I've certainly had some amazing ones to date so far with people from all over the world, from various walks of life, and that'll continue to do so in the future. So where I'm hoping this will go moving forward is that it continues to go in that direction, and the community gets bigger. It has more of an impact. We learn a lot more, and it becomes more interactive. Not just the case of that you guys tune in and listen to two people have a conversation, or you listen to me rant and ramble, but there will be a number of other things that are attached to the podcast which make it more interactive, which have more feedback and involvement from you guys. And one of these things is this little get together, and it's a very simple concept. It's just picking a bar, a date, a time, and just getting together and having a drink and having a chat and having a good time. There's nothing more to it at all, but I'm hoping that if it becomes a semi-regular thing, that it gets bigger and better each time, and that in some cases it might be that we might be able to do something that is not just a typical get into a bar and have a few drinks. We might be able to get access to something that's unique, or something that's cool and new and exciting, through whether it be previous people on the podcast, or whether it be new opportunities, or whatever it might be. But I'm hoping that wherever this podcast goes, that I can take you guys with me. And obviously, being in Sydney, a lot of you guys are from Sydney, and I'm getting people from all over the world tuning in, of course, but the people that are local to me will probably get a lot more benefit from that aspect of the extra things that come off the back of the podcast. But I am looking at a whole bunch of other things online that will hopefully draw in more people and have more people interacting with what this is all about. A big thing of what I'm hoping this will be is that while my name's all over the podcast, it becomes a community where we all work together to find information, to find people, to learn more, to grow more, all that sort of stuff. And through a whole range of different different mechanisms and tools and opportunities and whatnot. And yes, okay, I'm talking very, very vaguely and openly because I don't really have a clear defined path of where this is all going to go. But it's kind of exciting that I don't at the moment. But I just know that based on where I began and where I'm at now with this podcast and what I've been able to do, the impact's been significant. And each and every episode that I release, the downloads get higher and higher. I get a lot more people tuning in, not only from across the country here in Australia, but in New Zealand, throughout Asia, Europe, the US, even parts of Africa as well, which is pretty crazy. So there's more and more people that are tuning in, and I'm getting so much more feedback than I ever thought I would for this podcast, and it's so cool. It's been life-changing for me, and I'm going to have another episode dedicated to podcasts itself, not just for my own, but just to talk about other ones out there and why this platform is so underrated. I think if you're from the US, it's not so much underrated anymore. Podcast is a very, very popular platform. But I think for most other parts in the world, it's still new and it's still very fresh, and it's something that a lot of other people need to probably learn about and be exposed to. But anyway, going back to this Saturday is one facet of what I'm hoping to create off the back of the podcast, and there'll be a number of other things over time. I'm hoping that in my travels, not just as a musician playing in Lord, but traveling in general, that I'll be able to make the community bigger and bigger, and take the podcast with me, just to bring in more people and make this more interactive. So there's a lot of cool ideas, and I'm going off on tangents. And as you guys would be well aware by now, I tend to do that quite often and lose my train of thought. But I guess the purpose of this episode really is to rein it back in and tell you guys about what's happening this Saturday, and that, yes, more or less it's just an excuse to have a few drinks and get a bit loose and have a good time and chat and whatnot. But it's about building something. It's about having an opportunity for some of you guys to come out, talk with me, have some drinks, and to get a bit more feedback and suggestions from you guys. And I really want to understand what works, maybe what doesn't, even though it might be a bit hard to hear at times. But any ideas that you have. And I'm really looking for outside the box ideas. This format is not unique as far as having conversations with people, but what I could potentially build off the back of it could be very unique and special. So I'm all ears. I'm always open to suggestions, and a great way of doing that is doing it face-to-face over a few drinks. So this Saturday, May 28th, at the Fun Room, which is the small whiskey bar within Frankie's Pizza by the Slice. It'll be from about 6, and the bar will be private for us until 9 o'clock when it opens to the public. Frankie's opens from 4 p.m. though, so you can get down there early and have a few pre-drinks. I'll probably be down there from then. And that Sydney CBD, you can find all the details on Google. It's easy to do. If you don't know much about the venue or Jordan, who runs the show there, listen to episode 32 of the podcast where we have a great chat. If anybody needs some extra information or details or direction or whatnot, you can message me directly. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, blah, blah, blah. I'm everywhere. So you can find me very easily. But more than happy to give you guys some extra info depending on what you need. Anyway, enough of all this. As always, get onto iTunes. If you listen on iTunes, give me a rating and a review. Probably not for this particular episode, but you know what I mean. Just any support from you guys, a couple of minutes of doing a quick few taps makes a massive difference for this podcast. I get so many more listeners every time people share and rate and review and talk up this podcast. If you're listening via YouTube or any other platform, just share it around any way that you can get the podcast out to more people. It really means a lot to me, and it will help ensure that the podcast continues to get bigger and better each and every episode. And that's about it. I'll stop rambling. We'll see you guys this Saturday. For those that aren't in Sydney, I'll do a bit of a recap afterwards, and we'll have something in store for you guys later on down the track. But thanks as always for the support. It means a lot, and we'll speak soon. Ta-ta.